Welcome, everybody, to Resilient and Responsive, 5 strategies for demonstrating ERG impact. I am really excited to be here with you. I should probably tell you who I am. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. My pronouns are she and her, or ella if you use Spanish. And I am the Vice President of Learning here at Out and Equal. ERGs are very much the lifeblood of so much of the corporate work that is happening. And it's a tough time, but we are really going to be focusing on how can you prove your worth? How can you really demonstrate the impact that you have had on your organizations? So we are going to get started. I'm going to see if our tech team could bring up the slides on the side for me so we can start talking. And while they're doing that, I'm going to remind everybody that at the end of this session or at any time during this session, first of all, you can ask questions in the Q&A. My colleague Nikki is in there and is going to be helping us with that. And second, we have resources for you on this. I have a lot of questions to talk about with your ERG. Create a handout so you will have them all in one place. So we are going to start by actually getting you to talk to me, which is, if you are an ERG member, what is your role? And hopefully we have got this up here and it's running. And I'd love to know what your role is. So are you a chair or co-chair? Are you in another leadership role? Are you one of our great executive sponsors or champions, general members? Are you maybe supporting, so somebody in an inclusion department? Or maybe you're not involved at all. And I will give everybody just another moment to actually see this. And I'm going to display those results for everybody. So it looks like today we have got the majority of you are ERG leads. So we've got a lot of chairs and co-chairs as well as other people in leadership. And I always like to say all of you are in leadership. It's just about the titles that we have. We've got some of our great executive sponsors and champions. I'm seeing general members in there, ERG support, and a few people who are not yet involved with ERGs. So that gives us an idea of who is actually in the room. And now I want to switch to another question. So I'd love to know how long you have been involved with ERG work. And I am going to bring this up here. So are you one of our newbies, 0 to 5 years? Have you been around for a while? Wow, a lot of new people, welcome. 6 to 10, 10 to 15. All those people who have been around for more than 15 like me, solidarity, my friends. Wow. So it looks like during today's session, and for the people logged on live with us today, the majority of you have been involved with ERG work for between 0 and 5 years. So a lot of people new to this conversation, and I love the fact that we have that energy. We do have more established members, second coming in 6 to 10, a handful of 10 to 15, and we had 20 people who actually said, I have been involved in this more than 20 years, or more than 15 years. So one more question for you that I would love to hear about, because all of this is about what you are doing and how we can see this. So which of the following activities has your ERG engaged in the past year? And in this case, you can actually select all of the ones that apply. Is it advocacy internally, advocacy externally, looking for community support, mentoring, professional development, social activities, which do matter? Something close to my heart. Have you been doing training or something else? Let's see what people have. And it looks like as people are responding to this, it looks like we have a lot of people who have been participating in many of these functions. And I want everyone to pay attention to this. Look at all of the different activities that ERGs are taking on. It's not just one thing. You're not just the people who plan Pride Month. There are all different kinds of supports that you are providing to your organizations. And that is some incredible news. So I want to talk a little bit about how our ERGs are having an impact on organizations. So just to give you an idea of what is happening, about 90% of Fortune 500 organizations actually do have ERGs. And right now, about 64% of workers say that getting the opportunity to take part in workplace diversity and inclusion initiatives, in fact, is a big factor in whether or not they apply for a role. So the presence of ERGs, that opportunity to be involved, actually could sway somebody to apply for a role in an organization. And yet, we know there are some really scary headlines out there. Over and over again, we are hearing the news about attacks on diversity and inclusion work, organizations rolling back policies or changing the way that they are doing this work. And in many ways, it really can feel like the sky is falling. I was just on our earlier session today, and we were talking about how the onslaught of attacks has been nonstop. And sometimes, even in this space of diversity and inclusion within our organizations and talking about ERGs, it does feel constant. So I think when we are at these moments, when we feel that everything is raining down on us, that there are a lot of challenges out there, it kind of opens up the road for us. And the ultimate question is, at these moments, knowing all of the work that you have done in your ERGs and continue to do, and knowing there are some challenges in front of them, what are we going to do? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because here's the premise that I start at all the time. The first thing is, ERGs are transformative. They are essential to business and they're effective. We know that. Unfortunately, that is not enough in times where these challenges emerge. In order to ensure that our ERGs continue on and really thrive, it truly is up to us. And I believe that the way that we do this is by demonstrating our impact. So for the next hour together, we are going to have more interaction for you, assuming I can run polls, which is always questionable. But we are going to start by talking about a little bit of background about ERGs. I saw we had a lot of new people who are participating today. We have a little bit of history for you, some which some of you know. I'm going to admit a little that I actually learned along the way. Then I'm going to focus on 5 strategies for amplifying your ERG's impact right now. And then finally, we're going to get to what's next. As a reminder, my colleague Nikki Inclin is in the chat or in the Q&A right now. So if you have questions for me during today's session, please let Nikki know, and she's going to be managing those as we go along. I am a trainer, so you do have to do the ground rules with me. A couple of things. Biggest one, be open and be kind. We may disagree on some things today, and that's okay. We can still communicate with respect. I definitely want you to participate at your comfort level. As an introvert, I know it can be tricky, but hey, polls are totally anonymous. So the more input that you give to me, the better these sessions are going to be. If you have questions, use that Q&A to get clarity and make sure that you have fun. I love training. It is the thing that makes me happiest in my job, and today is a great opportunity to do it. I hope you're going to have fun with me because I have a hard time being serious all the time. But finally, the most important thing is I want you to be fabulous because you are here, because you are who you are, because you are out there telling the world your story. I believe that you are, and I just want you to amplify it just a little bit in our time together. So let's begin with some backgrounds, because knowing where you came from actually matters. So, oops, sorry there. I would like to know, what is the first organization that is actually credited with starting an ERG? And I am going to open the question for you now. Is it IBM, Xerox, American Airlines, Deloitte, or you don't know, but you bet I'm going to tell you real soon? I will give everybody an opportunity to weigh in here. And I'll give you just another moment. We're getting responses all over the maps, my friends. I love this. For those of you who know that I'm going to tell you soon, good choice, because, you know, I can't stop talking. Well, it looks like we have people who gave us a lot of different kinds of responses. And so let's go on and talk about where this actually started. The answer to the question actually is Xerox. Going back to the early 60s, the CEO at the time, Joseph Wilson, actually observed a lot of what was happening with the civil rights movement, and particularly how the impact of racial injustice and racism impacted Black employees. He started working with them, and out of that came what came to be known as the first ERG in 1971. Over the next 10 years or so, Xerox and other companies actually did expand these. So we started to see beyond just that first one, other ERGs developing, or network groups that supported other employees who often hold marginalized identities. But now I have another question for you, and I think this one is kind of an interesting one. Which organization is credited with starting the first LGBTQ ERG? I am a huge queer history buff, so I love this question, and I actually love the answer. So what do you think here, my friends? We've got up there as your options, AT&T, Apple, JPMC, HP, or you don't know, but you bet you're going to find out real soon. And I'll give everybody just another moment to weigh in on this one. Wow, we have responses that truly are all over the map on this one. Well, there actually are a couple of answers on this one. And this one I found to be really interesting. It's kind of a long story. So in 1978, HP, then known as Hewlett Packard, actually created a workplace group for LGBTQ employees called Glenn. Although if you look at ERG history, often where you see the first ERG formally set up is actually coming out of AT&T with their first chapter of League. Today, ERGs are everywhere. About 90% of Fortune 500 companies actually have them. And if you look at which ones are the most popular, in other words, those that tend to appear most frequently, what you actually find out is that it tends to be women's ERGs and then LGBTQ ones. So those are the two that tend to have the most activity. And over the years, ERGs have changed a lot. For those of you who have been doing this work for a while, you probably remember when we called ERGs affinity groups. And these were typically groups inside of organizations that were designed for people holding similar identities. They were very identity centric, and they were very focused on individual connections. But we saw those affinity groups evolve to what became known as employee resource groups. So it actually built on what these affinity groups started, but it brought in some new stuff. First of all, it often brought in allies to these communities. So in these groups, we didn't just have people with similar identities, but we often also had allies to those communities. They also kept the community-focused work that they were doing, but what we saw was more looking at how these ERGs could influence how organizations are doing business, including when it came to policies. And that evolution continues. Now many ERGs use the term BRG, which really builds on that ERG model. And it really is focused on moving beyond just that network, beyond just that support, beyond maybe even just that internal training, but really influencing culture and organizational policy. Now, our ERGs are at all different kinds of stages of development. No matter where you are right now, there is important work that you can be doing, because ERGs have accomplished a lot. And we need to talk about this. I think often people think that ERGs are social and they're a place where you connect with people and meet people, but there is so much more than that. There is research out there that has demonstrated that ERGs have increased a sense of belonging, which is attached to retention, by the way. They boosted employee engagement. They've actually provided leadership when it came to developing internal policies and looking at benefits. They have the power to shape what these policies look like and how they evolve. They provide methods to give skill building and mentorship opportunities to employees. They can influence market insights, even the products that organizations that are creating. And finally, the ability to be more effective in recruitment and retention. These are the things we need to talk about, because this is the work that you are doing. And that is so, so important. The question that we now have in front of us is, with all of the challenges that we know are coming up, how are we going to work to ensure that our ERGs are continue to be engines for change in our organizations? Which brings me to our 5 strategies to demonstrate ERG impact right now. The first one that I think we need to take on is cutting through the noise. So what do I mean when I say we have to cut through the noise? Well, it's a really relevant point right now. Where I started today's session was by showing you all of those headlines that basically said the sky over diversity and inclusion work is falling, and it's falling fast. We've also seen some statistics that actually suggest that there are some real challenges out there. Well, we did see a growth in jobs related to diversity and inclusion for a while. In the past year, we have seen a regression of some of that work. We have also seen the introduction, in some cases, the implementation of either policies or laws that are specifically designed to attack inclusion work that is happening out there, or corporate social sustainability work. And we know that the headlines continue to come at us announcing the death of inclusion work in organizations. But this is only a piece of the story. If that is all that we are focused on, then we are going to be in a place where we are absolutely immobile to act. So what are the ways that we actually cut through the noise? Well, the first thing that we need to do is reclaim this discussion. The discussion is not about the demise of inclusion work. It is, in fact, about how inclusion work has made organizations stronger. And the way that your ERG does this is by asking the right questions and being able to provide these answers. So spending time with your ERG, and even though you may intellectually know the answers to these things, making sure that everyone can do this is critical. What are the contributions that your ERG has made to the organization? Don't just think about the recent past, think about the history of your ERG. It may mean some conversations with people, which is always good to get that history, but actually be ready to give concrete examples about how the ERG has positively influenced the organization. How many people are participating? One of the metrics that organizations look at is employee engagement. If we look inside of your LGBTQ plus ERG, or if we look to all ERGs, what you will start to discover is that there are a lot of people engaged, and that ties to that engagement point. Do you know those numbers? Also, how can some of these contributions that you've made be connected to talent attraction or retention? When people are brought into organizations, when they join ERGs, are we asking them, did you know anything about this? Was this a factor? And then can we have those conversations? Can we really tie the work ERGs are doing to positively influencing business? I'm going to talk about that in a lot more detail in just a couple of minutes. But that is where we start demonstrating this is more than just a group. This is a force for change in our organizations. And finally, how is your ERG supporting and increasingly diversifying workforce? We're going to talk about the younger generation and why ERGs are so important to them in just a few minutes. But as we look at our workforce in general, it is more diverse than ever, calling on us to have a need for some way to support them. If you even look at our own census numbers, we know that there was a 276% increase in individuals who identify as two or more races. You want to talk about intersectionality? Here it is. And ERGs give many of those individuals the space to have conversations about their experiences, for others to learn, and for advocacy to make things better to happen. ERGs are directly connected to the way our workforce is changing. After you ask your questions, and you're going to see this format repeat itself, you need to show people your data. And this means doing a little bit of homework. So you should be able to produce data, and I mean some numbers too, on what your ERG has done, how many programs, how many people showed up for those programs, what did you learn in your surveys when you actually did those programs. You should be able to demonstrate specific examples about how your ERG has made business connections to positively influence business. Have you actually brought in more partners and more clients because of connections that your ERG made? Testimonials, the qualitative also matters. Comments, remarks from people who have been participating in the ERG who can talk about the influence that it has had on their career. I can't tell you how many people have told me my first promotion came because of the things I learned in my ERG. And also data connecting your ERG's work to talent acquisition. So if you saw a boost in a certain number of employees, did you have any hand in perhaps doing the training or the preparation for recruitment to do this? This is the data that people can't fight with, and this is the data that proves your worth. So now we are going to navigate a scenario together, and I'm going to give you some question options on this one. So one of your ERG members recently shared a situation in which they found themselves during a team meeting after mentioning an upcoming program that your Pride group is doing. A colleague made a comment about the company funding ERGs, referring to them as social groups, and then questioning what kind of utility they have to the organization, especially since diversity apparently is a dividing factor now. At the time, this person who's telling you the story said they were so shocked they actually couldn't even respond. But they'd like to know in the future, if this comes up again, how should they respond? So given what we just talked about, I am going to bring in a couple of options for you here. So what do you think is the best response strategy? Should that person just say that the company obviously supports ERGs, they're here to stay, end of conversation? Should they actually debate their premise? Would it be worth it for them to share a data point or two to show how the ERG is attached to the successful business? Or should they stay quiet? I'm really happy to see that a lot of people are jumping in on that data response one, but I will give everybody just another moment. And let's just face it, sometimes it may be a combination about a couple of these things. But when somebody is questioning the utility of ERGs and you're able to say, actually, let me show you exactly how this organization utilizes ERGs to improve business, that is a really solid argument and a really solid place for you to begin your conversation and, frankly, your advocacy for your ERG. So really good work there. Remember that what we're doing, these conversations, the questions we're answering, the data that we are gathering puts your ERG members in a place where they actually can be more effective advocates. So how do we cut through the noise? Biggest thing, you heard me say this a few times, start collecting your data now. Figure out what you are not collecting and what you need to collect. Ensure that you're collecting both qualitative and quantitative data. And by the way, if you are not a data person, I bet you that there is somebody in your ERG who would love to get a little tap on the shoulder and be asked to help. What a great way to cultivate talent and to bring somebody into the conversation. Pay attention, stay on top of the news. I'm not saying that we don't have challenges, but I'm saying make sure that you are reading into all of these articles and understanding the full picture and manage your responses. Just remember that when we have this bad news, it's very easy to get wrapped up in that. But if we can constantly do that pivot to, I hear what you're saying, but let me remind you how this ERG has changed the organization, it makes you a powerful advocate. This brings us to our second point, which is about building unity inside of our ERGs. So why is this a relevant point to demonstrating your impact? Well, as a person who identifies as queer, you've probably heard this one from me before if we've ever met. There are challenges inside of our community. There are disparities in how people are treated. There is discrimination inside of LGBTQ spaces. We know that not everybody has equal representation or equal platforms. And this is real. It creates divides and it creates challenges to really getting the work done if we don't have sort of our own work in order. Historically, we know that unity inside of the community, when it gets sidetracked, it actually hurts progress. We could look to a couple of different pieces of legislation that are out there that really got stalled because there were so many internal debates. And the bottom line is divide and conquer is a real thing. At times like these, when we are under attack, our unity as a community is more important than ever. But I wouldn't dare say it better than Marsha P. Johnson. There is no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. Unity inside of our ERGs when it comes to embracing everyone of different identity matters, and we have to address this issue. So the way that we do this is by starting some sometimes tough conversations inside of our ERGs. What does your membership actually look like when you look at the diversity of identities? Do you even actually know the answer to that question? And when you look at those numbers, are you seeing some real disparities, especially when you look at average demographics that teach us, for example, that the biggest piece of the LGBTQ community are bi+ folks? What are members saying about the way people are getting along and about the diversity inside of the group? What do those conversations sound like? Have you actually heard them? Are you actually going beyond just LGBTQ identities to figure out how we can build strength at our intersections? For example, inside of that LGBTQ space, across race and ethnicity or across generations. And also asking your ERG, what's the intentional work that you have done to actually address these kinds of challenges? Have you had conversations? Have you participated in training or learning or some kind of engagement? Or is this a conversation that you've never had? This may very much be the time for you to do that. Once you've had these conversations, you can start looking at the data. And in this case, I actually want to provide some data to you that makes the case as to why this unity conversation is so essential. I mentioned this just a moment ago. Bi adults make up the largest portion of the LGBTQ population, over 57% of the population. And yet what we tend to see across any place that we are looking, representation tends to be really low. And it is because bi people often face that double discrimination from inside and outside of the community. That is something that we need to grapple in. If our numbers look really low on that, maybe it's time to do some work. As we look at Gen Z, and we're going to be talking about them a lot this week, we know that the diversity of how they identify is greater than ever. So if you want your ERG to be relevant to this youngest generation coming in, you're going to need to do things that make it relevant. You're going to need to have programs and conversations and initiatives that actually engage individuals in many of these spaces. And we need to recognize that when we don't do this, there is a cost to the work. There is a cost when people do not feel included and when they disconnect. We know that when people start burning out, it actually costs organizations a small fortune. The same is true within our ERGs. This is the conversation we need to have. And so with that, I want to introduce another scenario for you. One of your ERG members has observed that the ERG, while focused very broadly on LGBTQ+ issues, has started to feel a little fragmented. Some members, particularly those from different racial or ethnic backgrounds and even younger generations, have voiced concerns that their unique needs and experiences are not being adequately addressed or even heard. They believe the group tends to prioritize issues that affect the majority, or what feels like the majority, primarily gay and lesbian members, without recognizing how diversity intersects with race, ethnicity, and age. This has started to cause some rifts in tension within your group, and you've noticed that a few of your members have actually stopped showing up for your meetings. So I have some options for you, and I will bring this up right now. As a leader, what do you think you should do first? And there are a lot of paths that you can take on here. Do you think that you need to discuss members' diverse needs and how to meet them? Maybe include some data on that? Do you think that you should just sort of go full speed ahead? Should you continue focusing on the priorities that you have actually set? Would you propose dividing the ERG into subgroups so that way people can focus on what they want to discuss? Or would you just set aside the members' concerns and trust that people are eventually going to get there? I will give everybody just another moment to respond. I saw a lot of responses come in really fast on this one. And it looks like the majority of people said we actually need to have that conversation. And we need to talk about what are these concerns and how can we do a better job meeting them. Also, including some of that data that we talked about on the demographics within LGBTQ spaces can be a powerful motivator. So it's not just your opinion, it's actually backed by data. We did have somebody say that we should continue focusing on strengthening the group overall. And that may be one of your focuses, but I think it's important that we are definitely dedicating some of our time and energy to these issues. A few people actually said that you could divide the ERG into subgroups so people can focus on what they want to discuss. And I'm going to say that in some cases that may be your path to an end, but the risk of having that by itself is that that is where those conversations stay. So if that is the path that you are actually going to use, remember, those groups need to be coming back into the main group, and then the main group accepting the fact that they actually should be, those subgroups need to inform the larger work of the organization. So really good work there. And again, I love that you see that this was not that there is only one way to go about this work. So when we talk about building ERG unity, what are the ways in which we do this? The first thing, survey your membership to find out what they need. Please stop assuming you know. You don't. You absolutely do not. People are willing to share in surveys in ways that they often will not in a face-to-face forum. Evaluate your programming. Does it all look the same? Are you addressing different parts of the community? Are more people getting a lot more airtime than other people? How can you correct this? Ask your membership for suggestions. I am willing to bet you big money that there are people in your ERG right now who have some great ideas about how to start these conversations, about how to build unity through education and through crucial conversations. But if they're not asked, they may not actually speak up. It may not feel welcoming. Work with your ERG leadership to discuss how you want to take this on. If you are one of those people who said, I'm not an ERG leader, this is a discussion to bring back. Keep track of what you are doing along the way. This is a really big deal. Where did you start in terms of your ERG demographics? And after you've put in some work, what does it look like now? Also track what you did that worked and maybe what didn't work, because those are the groundwork. That's the beginning of what you're going to do in your next round of programming. And finally, get help with the work. Out and Equal certainly can help you with this. We actually have a lot of learning sessions that might help on this particular topic. You have access to that if you are an Out and Equal partner, but also look into your community if you actually want a little bit more help. This brings me to my third point, which is ERGs to have impact need to inform the business that they are doing. So why is this relevant? Well, we started with this premise that many people still see ERGs as more social or more just about networking. And yet we know that ERGs have been involved in really big and significant change changes inside of their organizations and even external to the organization. So just a couple of examples about this. ERGs have really created safe space, so groups were able to come together and figure out how they can impact business operations. And we know that when ERGs actually can talk about the impact that they've had, we were part of creating this product. We were part of informing this. It demonstrates the worth of ERGs. And there is a lot of money out there in when we get into this part of the conversation. We know that LGBTQ global spending is over $3.9 trillion. So if your ERG has the opportunity to influence or attract that market, that could be really interesting to a company. And about half of Americans actually say that they look at the policies and the work of the companies that they buy from when they are spending their money. So when this work is happening and when your ERG is informing it, it actually can help the organization's bottom line. And there are some great examples of this. I only was able to grab 4 of them because we don't want the slides to be too crowded. MetLife did some amazing work, and it was partially fueled by their ERG on looking at LGBTQ elders. There were 2 editions of research, and that then became a public product. It also influenced the way they were looking at some programs. MasterCard's True Name Project, which has been picked up by some other organizations. Again, something that partially came out of a conversation with the ERG. At Frito-Lay, one of their best-selling products, which is the guacamole Doritos, actually was something that their Latino ERG highly influenced and helped in the development of, and it made big money for the organization. And Dow's Black ERG partnered with an organization called The Most to actually work on hair care products that got a lot of attention and actually had some really great sales. So if you want to do this work, how do you actually get into it? Well, you start by asking the right questions with your ERG. First one is, do you have examples of what has already been done? In other words, has your ERG participated in this already? And I know many of your ERGs have, but have you documented it? Do you have a quick snapshot of a case study of what your role was, what the impact was, and what the impact was on the organization? Do you have that? And can every single one of your members tell that story? That should be something you're doing. If this work hasn't happened yet, it's time to start brainstorming where your opportunities may lie. And remember that not everything that your ERG influences is necessarily going to be seen. I just talked about more public products, things that you can see and things that you can touch. Sometimes it may be in the way your organization does its work, maybe in the communities that it's reaching out to. Maybe it is seen in switches in how marketing or recruitment is done. Remember, it's not always a product that you can see, but see what those might actually be and figure out, is this something we can actually help influence? And finally, are there challenges out in your field where your ERG can provide key intelligence and insights? This is where you get to really put a design thinking to work. A great example of that was that True Name project. We knew that there was a challenge out there for people who are trans, for people who have non-binary, and have changed their names when it comes to their credit cards. That was intelligence that was very much brought in by the LGBTQ community through the ERG in many respects. So that's a place where intelligence was brought in, and then people were able to get to work, often using design thinking. Finally, you want to make sure that you're able to show people your data. Collect data that demonstrates your impact. In other words, once you have done this work, once you have created impact, how many people were influenced? How did it change the bottom line? How many new recruits did you have in from a specific group that you were looking at for one of the recruitment projects? So make sure that you have that data. So it's not just talking about it, but actually providing some numbers to it. Be sure to contextualize your contributions. I know that a lot of you are entirely too humble and you do not always talk about the role that you and your ERG played in something. Make sure that you are also giving that background when this story is told, and make sure that the work is openly discussed. Lots of people are looking to see what are organizations doing in the inclusion space when they decide where they want to go work. When your products or the things that you have influenced are being talked about, when people see and hear about them, it may just be attracting talent to your organization. So we have a real world skills navigate the scenario for you, and I am going to read off your questions. So your ERG is feeling pressure to demonstrate the value it brings to the organizations. While anecdotally, you know it contributes in big ways, members want to find ways to tie their involvement in the group to benefiting the bottom line. Which of the following action paths feels like it would be the best one for you? Do you think it might be looking at lines of business and identifying possible opportunities for providing insight? Is it working with talent acquisition? Is it partnering with another ERG, maybe to look at a shared market issue? I'm going to give everyone a moment on this. And there is no right or wrong answer on this one. I'm just curious to see what people are thinking. It looks like a lot of people, wow, a lot of people are saying that they are looking at partnering with another ERG to figure out, is there a shared issue that we might be able to talk about? And maybe can we brainstorm together on a possible work partnership? I love that. That's where intersectionality comes in, friends. This is what it looks like. It's not just talking about it, it's doing it. You're finding the commonalities at those intersections. We also have, it looks like people saying they're going to look at the lines of business and ID possible opportunities. And we had some people talking about working with talent acquisition, make sure that they are ready, educated, and open to conversations with employees who may be LGBTQ identified and asking questions about that. That is something important that you can do. So with that, this gets us to how you take action on this one. Big thing, if you've done this work before, refresh the narrative, make sure everyone can talk about it. If you've never done it, get to work, my friends, get to work. It's time to start that brainstorming, and this can be really fun. If you have design thinking people in your team or on your ERG, this is a place where you can really leverage their talents. Look to other ERGs. What are they doing? How did they do it? How did they get past some of the barriers? Make sure that you are communicating. Ensure that everyone can talk about the work and talk about the contributions the ERG made. Don't get distracted by the shiny objects. Not everybody is going to produce a rainbow something that you'll be able to see. But the changes that you make in terms of outreach and engagement may be a huge game changer for a lot of people. And document your work so you can talk about it. Our next strategy, when we look at creating impact, is supporting the next generation. And I know this should seem like a no-brainer, but sometimes I think we acknowledge that something is important, but we don't always get to work on it. So why is supporting the next generation as part of your ERG work so relevant? Well, it already should be part of your work, but let me give you a few numbers. Nearly a third of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ+. This is the largest constituency in our community, and the largest group of them identify as bi. This generation has come of age in the most anti-LGBTQ legislative environment in history. They are under fire right now. They are feeling it. Many of them, when they were younger, saw a lot of positivity, and then they saw this turnaround. So they are definitely feeling the pressure. This should be a red flag for you. This should be a call to action for you to recognize that more support is going to be needed from those of us who have been around. And we also know that in 2024, data showed that 90% of LGBTQ individuals between 13 and 24, and remember on the far end of that, you're going to see people who are in the workforce, said that their mental well-being actually was negatively impacted by the politics that are out there. A significant portion of them said a lot. So whether you are looking at the sheer number of queer young people entering your workforce, or you are looking at the challenges that they are facing, there is work for your ERG to do. But in order to do that work, we need to start by asking the right questions. So the first one is looking at your ERG again. What is the generational composition of your ERG? If you're seeing concentrations or big concentrations or even some gaps, it's time to do some work. And again, talk to us at OmniCool. We would love to help you in terms of looking at how you can get better at this. What are the needs of your ERG members by generation? Do you even know? What I, as a Gen X person, would say is my biggest need, I bet is really different from somebody in Gen Z. We need to have crucial conversations inside of ERGs to clarify that, and those answers give you the path, the pathway, the opening to the pathway to develop programming. What are the specific needs of your queer employees, and specifically, what do they look like as you get into younger generations? Do not assume that you understand this. Ask people, give them the opportunity to talk, and they will continue engaging with you. And are there opportunities for your ERG to work with recruitment and retention groups in order to be more effective in recruiting young talent? Remember the part that I talked about influencing business? Recruiters go to all different kinds of recruitment events. Make sure that they are there when it comes to the LGBTQ ones too, and your ERG can help with this. So a few things to keep in mind when it comes to data. There is a big case for Gen Z inclusion and for work with Gen Z. We've actually got a great session on Thursday on this one too. There is actually, by one estimate, missing the mark with Gen Z employees could organizations can actually lose access to a talent pool of up to 10 million workers. So making sure that you are being really forward with this. This is a place for your ERG to show impact. That could bring in the best talent. We also know that a significant portion of both millennial and Gen Z employees who leave organizations say that the reason they left was because they did not feel welcomed as LGBTQ employees. So we know that this generation is paying attention. There is your case for taking action. Whether it is you want to do the right thing or you're looking at these numbers, there's a good case for engaging more with Gen Z. So I have another scenario for you because I shouldn't talk the whole time. You recently did a survey of your ERG members and noticed two key things. First, the vast majority of your members were either Gen X or millennial. Second, in the space where you were able to invite people to provide comments about their feelings about the ERG, there were two pretty strong comments saying that as young professionals, people didn't feel that there was much value in the ERG. Now, when you took this and actually reviewed it with your ERG leadership, a couple of members kind of seemed ambivalent about addressing what you saw there, saying that it's just how the generation is, there's nothing for us to change. What do you think actually is the best way to get people to respond at this moment? Do you think it is identifying a couple of Gen Z members and asking them to explain the issue? Is it starting with your leadership? They need to get some learning because clearly there are some gaps. Is the best way to handle this connecting with the leadership in the young professionals ERG to explore solutions? Or is it just asking people to rethink their position? And again, there's no right or wrong answer on here, although I think there's some that may be a little bit more effective, but I want to hear what you think. Right away, I saw that option C really, really skyrocket, which is connect with leadership in the young professionals ERG or the generational ERG, which often has breakout groups to explore solutions. So I love that idea. So here is an opportunity for your ERG to meet people at this intersection, to make new connections, to demonstrate your impact by demonstrating the partnerships that you create and how you can create a larger impact when you're working together, as well as getting people to help inform the work that you are doing. I love that. I've seen a lot of your organizations do this, and the work that comes out of it is amazing. I also love the answer about starting with your leadership. I think this is a big deal. If you're hearing responses like, oh, that's just the way they are, that means that you've got some work to do because it actually means there's something that's not going right. So some education might be necessary there. You know, making the ask, could you rethink what you just said is also warranted. The identifying one or two Gen Z members and asking them to explain it, I think you need to be really careful in that one because there is something where you put people in the position of having to be a spokesperson for an entire community, which isn't fair. It's also not effective. So just be mindful that if that is the road that you are taking, you probably want to inform it in other ways in addition to that, and do not put the responsibility on those members of Gen Z to solve this problem for you. This is in fact a conversation and some work that you're going to have to do yourself. So your action items for this one, find out what you don't know. If you have not surveyed your membership, are you hearing a theme here? And looked at those results by generation, you need to get to work because you might be missing some really big stuff. Listen to young queer voices. I can't say this enough. Sometimes they do, in fact, know better than you. They know better than me. Stop just writing people off because they're young. Somebody probably did it to you at some point and you didn't like it. So let's not replicate that behavior. Elevate the accomplishments of your younger queer members in your ERG. Make sure that they are getting credit for the work that they are doing and the progress that they are making. Give them the platform that they need. Dive into programming that meaningfully explores intersections of identity. This may be in partnership with other ERGs as you look at this particular generation. It may be in some learning that we can do. Again, Out and Equal can help with that. So make sure that you are actually doing it in a meaningful way. Don't just check the box and move on. That is absolutely not the way that this works. Partner with other ERGs in your efforts. A lot of you went to that response right away on that last question. Don't do this work alone. Many of you have ERGs that are focused on generations in the workplace. Why not start the conversation there? And once again, document and talk about your work. What did you do? Did it work? What are you going to do next time? What are you going to build on? How are the next leaders of the ERG going to take what you did and move on? The only way for you to do that is to document it. The second thing is have your ERG members talking about that work. When you talk about the work, you are demonstrating your impact. Which brings us to our last item, leveling up your leadership. And this one is a little bit more complicated. Leveling up leadership and making it stronger is always relevant. But in this case, I want to talk to you about it in terms of two different groups. I'm talking about both your ERG leadership as well as your executive champions and sponsors. There is always an opportunity to do more with these leaders and to make them more powerful, but sometimes we need to figure out what those challenges look like. So the bottom line is that having an engaged, effective, enthusiastic, happy ERG leadership who feels supported and like they know what they're doing, that makes your ERG more effective. And in fact, when people look at groups like ERGs and they see leaders who look unhappy and burnt out and not sure what to do and kind of bitter, it turns people off. It reduces the impact that your ERG can actually have. Just remember that having great, strong leadership can attract other people to leadership. If people look like they're benefiting from it, if they feel like they're learning something, if they're talking about the impact that ERG leadership has had on their careers, other people will want to opt in. But in order to do that, you got to get those leaders strong. And on the other side, with our executive champions and sponsors, we know that just being designated as an executive champion or sponsor does not necessarily mean that people know all of the things that they need to know about this, about the organization or about what they need to do as supporting your ERG. Executive champions are, in fact, often allies who can always benefit from extra education about the LGBTQ community, about the specific impact of what's happening out there on the people inside. They need to hear those stories, but you have to help tell those stories. Bottom line, educated executive champions are effective executive champions. When they know the issues, when they understand what's at stake in this organization because your ERG has taught them, that is when they can really take action. So what are the questions we need to ask? So let's start with the questions we should be asking about ERG leadership. First one is, what kind of development work have you done for your ERG leaders? Have you done any? If you have done it in the past, how did it go? For those people who went through whatever program that was, did it work for them? Or do they have feedback on how you can make it better? If you need external assistance in this effort, you may need some help. Talking to other ERGs can always help, but other organizations, and I'm just going to mention one called Out and Equal, might be able to help with this too. Who in your leadership hasn't had any access to any kind of development in their role? Look at the people in ERG right now. If they've never had any opportunity to learn, to do, to improve their skills, it's time to really take a pause and figure out how we can do that. And finally, a big one, and I really love this one, and this comes from my many years of field organizing. Think expansively about leadership. By bylaws, you need to have certain positions in your ERG. But think about how you can create other leadership roles. Maybe it is the leader who is going to manage data for the ERG. We talked about that. The leader who's going to manage your social, the leader who's going to manage your comms, who's going to do your programming or even specific types of work. Giving those people a nod, maybe a little bit of a title, is really empowering. It also creates a powerful pipeline for you to look at when it's almost the end of your term as the co-chair and say, you know what, I bet you that person would be amazing. I saw them in action. They were so excited about doing this. Let's talk to them. It gives you the talent pipeline so many of you are looking for. For your executive sponsors and champions, let's start with this one. Honestly, what is your ERG's relationship with your executive champion? Is it effective or is it not? And if it's not, where do you think there are opportunities for improvement? This is not an attack. This is simply getting yourself in the position to have a conversation. What's the point of an executive champion or sponsor if we're not engaging with them and helping them help the organization? So really have that conversation and present your results respectfully. Everybody is trying. What have you actually asked your executive champions to do in their role? Have you asked them to do anything specific? People are looking for direction, especially people who might be new to the sponsor game. You can help them understand, do this, don't do that one, but this will be really, really meaningful to us. What does the executive champion see when they look at the ERG and its impact? Do they actually have a view of what they think the ERG is doing? Have you asked them what they are seeing? What they are seeing, even though you may not agree with it, could really shed some light on where your ERG has some opportunities to do some improvements, some learning, some adjustments. And finally, look at that ERG, the executive champion sphere of influence, and see, is there anybody in that sphere of influence who they may be able to network with to help you meet your goals? Perhaps there is somebody in that person's sphere of influence who is unbelievable at a specific function that you need. Perhaps that executive champion will then be able to engage with that person and get them to help your ERG. But the only way you do that is by really getting to know that executive champion. So when it comes to showing them your data, a few things to keep in mind. Make sure that you are tracking what you're doing to demonstrate your impact. So if you are launching education for your ERG leadership or for your champions or sponsors, make sure that you do pre and post engagement surveys. How did you feel coming into this? What would you give your skill level, as you go into it, and then something afterwards. So that way you can see, did it work? Use the data, get feedback from people as you do these engagements. Did it work? Or did it partially work, but if you had done this one thing differently, it would have been amazing. That is really important to hear. And I know it's hard to hear that what you put your heart and soul into didn't have the impact you wanted, but you can put more heart and soul into it and make an even bigger impact if you're willing to humble yourself. And know that leadership matters absolutely universally. When you talk about your success with your ERG leadership, when you have your executive sponsor out there talking about it, it really does help. All right, one more scenario, my friends. This one's a big one. Your organization assigns executives to be executive champions for ERGs. You recently got a new one. Your champion is an ally. She's very nice. She's warm. She's friendly. She talked about all her gay friends. She was really into it. But you also notice that she has some significant gaps in her learning. She confuses a few terms. She uses the word lifestyle. When you told her about upcoming programs, she was enthusiastic. But it wasn't going quite where you wanted it to go. Your ERG leadership team left the meeting, with this sponsor when you tried to get them more engaged, feeling a little bit concerned about how you're going to work with this individual. I would love to hear what you think your first step actually should be. Do you think that you should reach out to the inclusion lead in your organization? Should you follow up with an email to your executive champion with maybe a few learning resources to help get them up to speed? Are you going to work around her? She's a good person, so get what you can. Or are you going to send a thank you note and invite her to be a participant in your upcoming ally training? I see people went heavily to one of those responses. So let me quickly sum this one up because I want to make sure we wrap up and get plenty of time for questions. And if you do have questions for me, I may have answers for you. Make sure they're in the Q&A. So it looks like the majority of people send the thank you note. Thanks for doing this meeting. But you know what? We've got this great ally training coming up and we'd love for you to come. I think there's a lot you'd get out of it. We're going to be covering a bunch of things like language and current issues. I think that is a really warm and effective way to do it. It's a way to give that executive champion an opportunity to learn without shaming them. I mean, you can certainly reach out to your inclusion lead and maybe look for some guidance on, hey, do you have any suggestions about how I can work? I wouldn't say this person's not going to fit. We can't do this. I think the question is, how do you suggest we work together better? You can follow up with an email with some great learning resources. A couple of these can happen at the same time. And there are a few people who said, let's just work around her. For people who went to that one, I'm going to challenge you to actually not go to that. I want to challenge you to try one of these other things. Maybe it's the sending the email and just attaching a couple of resources that you think will happen. I think there's always potential, but we often just need to show people how to actually do that. So quickly, what are the ways that you can get to work on this one? After you've asked your question about all that leadership, start mapping out your action plan. If you have no training, if you have old training, if you have training that kind of has holes in it, it's time to figure out what your next steps are going to be. If you don't have the resources, please talk to us at Out and Equal. We actually can help you with that. We have a lot of new stuff coming out in 2025. I bet you we're going to be able to assist. Be clear with your ask to leaders. Make sure you state, I need to see you. I would like to see you at this. It would be really helpful if you could do this. Could you connect us with this person? Don't make it fuzzy. Make it clear so you can be really clear in your communications. Survey people along the way. If you're doing training, if you're doing development, find out if it is actually working, if it is helpful, and document what you're doing. Again, it helps you track what worked, what didn't work, and so it can be built on and replicated. And once again, I can't move my own slides because I'm just not computery today. So quickly, as we get into Q&A, here is the biggest thing, people, in case you haven't heard it from me already. ERGs are powerful. And like, we all need to say this, and we need to say it loud, and we need to not be bashful about it. You have changed organizations. You are supporting people. So many people can point to their ERG involvement as what kept them there, as what fueled them, as what even made them grow. Make sure that we are talking about it. But remember, how powerful they are always will depend on you. You're the only one who can change the impact that you are having. So very quickly, before we get to Q&A, I'm just going to remind you about two things. Make sure that you have, make sure that you look at the CVent app to continue your learning. I know a lot of people are probably wondering if you'll get slides from this. We do not distribute slides, but I promise you this handout is actually going to have all of those questions and discussions that you need to have. Also look at that partner learning catalog. And with that, I need to take a breath before I pass out. I'm going to ask if Nikki can join me for some Q&A.
Hello, hello. So this very exciting topic has sparked lots of great questions. So if it's right, we're going to just dive in and get through as many as we possibly can. So our first one, how do you get around not being able to collect data on individuals due to employment laws, policy, and sensitivity of the data?
Yes, you're going to have to definitely work, if you are asking those questions and there are any questions about that, you're going to need to work with your HR departments to find out what you can ask and how these questions can be asked. Many of your organizations are participating in self-ID, so some of that data is in fact being collected. There may be ways to get some information on that, and that actually might help. You also can informally start listening to people. I think often we are not even paying attention to what people say about their identities when they start sharing, and we completely miss it. And if you are starting to hear these people emerging, if you're starting to hear different kinds of identities emerging, that should be a signal to you that people are showing up and it's time to get to work. So the first thing is make sure you know what you are and are not allowed to collect. Also check in to see if any of this can be informed by any of the self-ID work that is being done in your organizations, and then pay attention to those informal cues.
Awesome, great ideas there. Thank you, Jean Marie. So on a similar note, our next question kind of touches upon a bit of this. Can you provide some more examples of what data we can or should collect? Would love to hear more about what other folks are collecting to help demonstrate the impact of their ERGs.
Different ways that you can look at this, and I'm not answering the question, but it kind of depends on where you are and what you are really looking to do. For me, as somebody who spent a lot of time organizing and helping ERGs develop programs, one of the things that I start with is the data that you should be asking about is, what do we need? What is actually necessary? I think when you start asking that question, you will get clues as to where you should dive deeper. If some of the responses that you initially are getting are about things like, I don't feel like there's enough diversity in this group, I feel like there's more that we can do, then you're going to know that you can ask more questions about specifically, what are you looking for? So take those first questions, take your needs, what do you want to accomplish? What are the things that you need to know about your ERG membership? Ask your initial questions, and then use some of those responses that you are starting to get as the way to fuel what questions you develop after that. My biggest things are you getting programming that resonates with you? Do you feel represented? Are there programs that you're not seeing that you think we should be embarking on? Are there resources that we haven't talked about that you think we should be looking into? Ask people to find out what you're missing. That is often a great place to start. And Nikki knows this. We work together. We're on the same team. I'm very, very lucky to work with her. Often the question that I ask to my team is, what am I missing? And I think that might be a place where you can actually begin these conversations. And then based on what some of those initial responses are, you can then start building that out. And I'm always willing to help if anybody wants to talk.
I think that outlines a great process for us to start building off of. So now we have another question that I think we hear pretty often. Do you have suggestions for a BRG whose membership are mostly allies? Is there a way to make sure our LGBTQIA+ members are heard while encouraging all good humans to join the cause?
And yes, we do hear this one a lot. So first of all, allies, thank you for being engaged. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for the extra energy that you're about to put in as we enter into a pretty challenging time. So I just want to say that first. I think that sometimes when we hear that, there are potentially two different conversations that we can have. The first one is your ERG program like so tilted and completely focused on allyship that it may seem as though there isn't anything there for LGBTQ members? And I've seen this happen a couple of times, and it was never with a bad intention, but people saw all of these allies and everything switched over to ally, and there wasn't a whole lot being done. So I think look at what your programming currently is, and think, can we start some smaller programs that are a little bit more LGBTQ focused that may actually bring people into the room who didn't want to come into the room for the ally focused programming? So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing, and this is a little bit of a more difficult decision, there is and there has been sometimes tension in ERGs between LGBTQ members and allies. And I think it is always important at any time, at any time you or I could be sort of the guest in the room. We are the person who is there to support, maybe not there. I think it is an important conversation to sometimes have with allies if the allies are pushing too much into the ally-only direction, to remind them our mission is broad. And in order to accomplish our mission, we're going to need to diversify that programming. And some of that programming will not apply to you, but that's okay, because some of the programming for allies doesn't apply to LGBTQ people. And that is a really tough conversation because you never want to discourage your allies, because your allies are incredible and have done game-changing things, and we all know this. But there is this tension, and we, as part of that building unity inside of the ERG, this is part of that work too.
That makes sense. Thank you for bringing that nuance to the conversation there. So our next question: when your site has a heavy focus on the networking and social aspect of an ERG, how do you propose switching that to a more informative type of event? How do you?
Oh, I love this question. That is such a tough one because people get really into like the fun stuff, right? Like we all love Pride Month, we love the happy hours, we love the networking stuff. Here's the thing: you need to create programs that excite people, like training that's great. Learning opportunities that excite people, topics that will get people to actually say, you know what, I totally like to do happy hour, but I'm really, really interested in this, presentation that there's going to be. And you can always attach a little bit of social to it. Just because you've done some sort of educational event doesn't mean that afterwards you can't have a portion for networking and for some fun. But I think the key is find engaging programming. There are so many fascinating topics out there. We offer a lot of trainings. I like to think that we're a pretty fun group. I certainly know Nikki is more fun than I am, as you can tell. But find like the things that get people interested. And a way that you might be able to do that is conduct, you guessed it, a survey. Ask people what they're interested in. We have our ERG survey. I'm going to remind everybody about that at the end of today's session. We're asking you what kind of programs you are doing and that you are interested in. You should be doing the same, because maybe if somebody suggests a program that's really fascinating to them and other people, it will actually break people out of more social only and get them into other stuff. Make it fun. Learning should not be boring.
Of course, of course. Thank you for that. So our next question here: can you give examples, excuse me, of the types of training that ERG leaders can receive?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that in 2025, Out and Equal is going to be rolling out a whole lot of new trainings and resources and tools for ERGs and for ERG leaders. So there's going to be a lot coming from us. But if I'm just thinking at the very top level, very, very top level of the topics that I typically think an ERG leader needs to have, the first one is in their communications. So do ERG members know how to communicate as a leader of a group? Because sometimes we are dealing with sensitive stuff. Do our ERG members know how to create programming? Just because you became the chairperson doesn't mean you necessarily have experience in putting together a fun and engaging program. So that is something else. The other things that you can look at is talent development and talent pipelines. So teaching your ERG leaders to actually have their eyes open, that they're always looking for those emerging leaders, those people who show potential, and then how do they start engaging them on a higher level? We are also going to be rolling out a whole lot of more formal trainings on ERG leadership, working with executive champions, and a number of tools this year. But those are where I start. Think about those essential skills. For the person who asked this question, I would also say to you, look at the job description for the ERG leader. There are competencies in that job description. If your leaders don't feel comfortable with each one of those competencies, that may be the roadmap to where you want to start in your organization on developing some learning or finding learning from other people who can help.
Awesome, great points there. And so when you talked about Gen Z, that seemed to also spark a great number of questions. And let's take on one of those right now. So our first Gen Z related question here. Many employers look towards their Gen Z workers for guidance on DEI initiatives. This work is typically left unpaid. How should these workers discuss this work to be compensated, and or how can workers advocate for this work to be compensated?
I'm going to concede that this is not an area of my expertise, so I don't want to speak too out of turn. But if I were going to embark on this, one of the things that I would definitely do is I would start looking at how other organizations, particularly in your industry, are handling this question. I'm going to be so crass as to say it. How do your competitors handle this? What is their process for this? Do they actually have a plan on how they handle compensation in these cases? And if it's not necessarily in your immediate circle, look at what other organizations are doing. There's lots of great resources, Harvard Business Review, Stanford Social Innovation Review, that cover topics like this. See what those norms are, what the trends are. And I think when you can bring that data back and say, here's the way other organizations are handling this, let's talk about how we might be able to address it. That is a really good strategy for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so here's another one that's going back more to the ERG, BRG conversation specifically. I would love to hear how BRG leaders have been successful in gaining chargeable billable funds for their BRGs. Do you involve the BRG talent in projects? Any thoughts on
I'm just trying to make sure I understand this question completely. I have to admit to you, I'm a little bit fuzzy on this one, and I think what we're asking for is how we are handling actually the funding for the BRG and for how we do this. I have to admit I'm a little bit fuzzy on this question, and I don't want to speak out of turn. I see it's somebody who I know who actually asked it. If you could email me, learning@outandequal.org. Maybe if I have a little bit more background, I can answer this one effectively. I don't want to give people the wrong answer while I'm here and with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're almost at time. We have a few more questions left, but I think we should probably wrap it up at this point. And Jean Marie, I'm going to hand it back over to you to close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you, everybody. And apologies on that last one. I really do want to answer the question, but I never want to speak out of turn because my mouth gets me in trouble more than anyone knows. So a few things. After today's session on the CVent app, make sure that you download the resource. It has all those questions to discuss this with your ERGs. Also, please, please, on behalf of people like me and Nikki, please use your partner learning sessions. We have content already that I think would help with some of this. We're going to have a lot more in 2025. Please talk to us, learning@outmequal.org, if you want to do that. And one last thing, because we are talking about ERGs, and if tech team, if you could move me to that next slide, thank you. We have our ERG survey going on right now. Your responses are going to make this data amazing. There is so much that we need to understand about what ERGs have done and are doing and want to do and they need. And the only way to do that is if your voice is heard. If you either use the SurveyMonkey link that is on the screen, or if you want to be cool, just scan that little code. It will take you to our ERG survey and you will be able to take that. It will be open, we think, until the end of January. But we'll have more information on that. But make sure that you are participating. Your voice really does matter. It'll also steer what kind of learning content we're developing for you. And with that, that gets me to just about time. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for participating. This was a new session, first time that I ever did it. So I hope that it moved the needle. I hope it gave you things to think about. It is on demand, so you can watch again and pull out pieces of it if you like. But make sure that you talk to us because we want to help. So thank you for everything that you've done, everything you're going to do, and I will see you on a session sometime soon.